Hey, before we start the show, I'd like to give a shout out to a very special sponsor of the Code Story podcast, and that's Dev Mountain. Dev Mountain is one of the highest rated coding schools in the country, employing experts who are passionate about sharing their craft and empowering the next wave of programmers. Through their boot camp, they accelerate education by focusing on modern skills to align their students with the needs of the tech industry. They offer a variety of courses from web development to UX design to iOS development, and their hands-on approach enables students to launch their careers or build their startups and ultimately to achieve their goals. I can personally vouch for the quality developers they produce, having hired 6 graduates from their Dallas campus. Not only does Dev Mountain teach the practical skills needed to build software, they give their students a foundation to amplify the necessary creative thinking, problem solving, and project-focused skills required for tech professionals today. You can find out more information about their programs and how to sign up at devmountain.com. That's devmountain.com.
I grew up in a mobile home. I didn't have running water for part of that time. I had a dad who worked in a mine, and really I just had no idea really about technology. So I was really fortunate growing up that my mom, instilled this curiosity and this learning, because that made a big difference to me in getting out of, I guess, that situation. You're sitting at the foot of the mountain and there is a massive mountain to climb, and you know that you've got to break this thing down to even attempt approaching it. My name is Eric Sharp. I'm the co-founder and technology advisor for Degreed.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries who share in the critical moments of what it takes to change an industry and build and lead a team that has your back. I'm your host, Noah Lappart, and on today's show, how Eric Sharp built a platform to enable business users to build skills and jailbreak the degree. All this and more on Code Story. Eric Sharp grew up with a unique background. With vivid memories of growing up in poverty, he recalls being distinctly inspired towards education when his mother went back to school to be a teacher. She instilled in him curiosity and a desire to learn, which made a big difference in changing his life trajectory. Using this passion, he and his co-founders were motivated to build the vision for a SaaS learning platform called Degreed, enabling learners and businesses to build the skills they need for the future. Tell me about Degreed. Tell me about what Degreed is before we started.
Yeah, Degreed is a SaaS learning platform that enables learners and businesses to build and measure the skills they need for the future. That's the tagline. It really offers a more holistic and accurate way to view a person, their skills, and their learning. We like to say, if somebody asked you if you're physically fit and you answered that you ran a marathon in 1984, it's a terrible way to describe your fitness. But that's what we've done for decades, really, when it comes to education and learning, where you reference a degree that you may have gotten decades ago, rather than the things that you're learning now or the skills that you've gained to this point in time. So we really provide that for really big companies across a lot of the Fortune 20 and many big companies have brought us in to really change their learning culture and instill a learning focus and this focus on skills versus just training or compliance training.
How did you come up with that idea and then how'd you get started? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, my co-founder is David Blake, and he has been in ed tech for years, and this was his dream and his vision. So I take no credit from that, that side of it. He has been definitely a visionary and saw this need, the need to really change the way the world looks at education and learning, and that was really motivating for me. So I got involved early on and met David. Then really since then, just building and growing the company and trying to achieve this massive vision.
You and David starting Degreed, stepping out, wanting to build this grand vision. Tell me about how you got started building it. Tell me about maybe the MVP or even how you started even approaching the tech?
To be completely honest, that's what I love about technology. Is what I love about development is the creative part, right? Of sitting down to a blank slate. Whether it's Notepad, back in the day, it was Notepad and it was just empty. And then you could start and create something that's pretty amazing. So back when we jumped into Degreed, then the early MVP was really focused around tracking formal courses from colleges, because that was degrees were what people recognize as education. And so we took that and said, hey, let's break it apart and allow people to track and really see what's going on inside of a degree. I've always been kind of this balance between technology and business. And so I found a really healthy focus, even with a startup, right? To say, let's figure out the things for this MVP that are going to really drive the business value. So we had a lot of early discussions around that and really chopped it off just week after week. With the tech side of things, I spent about half my career in Java, half in .NET, C#, and most recently, most recent half in C#. So that's where we got started. We built it with the back end of C#. We used ASP.NET MVC, hosted on Azure, which came into play because we got so many benefits as a startup to stick with Azure and build on that. We obviously used Visual Studio as our IDE, and the front end we early on with the MVP used jQuery, but then evolved it using Angular after that to call our REST APIs and bring things back.
When you're walking through building an MVP, those priorities translate to decisions that you have to make in the tech. What can we do now? What can we do later? Tell me about those decisions and trade-offs that you had to make kind of early on in the business. Like, we can build this, but we can't build this, or we can build this, but in a very limited manner. Do you run into anything like that?
Yes, all the time. Once you view the world as, especially with a startup where time is limited, right? Your days could be numbered if it doesn't go well. So prioritization of your MVP and beyond becomes really critical. And like I said, the focus on business value just led me to build and have our team build these vertical slices of that value in the MVP. And again, we had really frank discussions about not being able to do everything. Really had great partners in David Blake as my co-founder, and a few months after me, Kat Kennedy joined as a front end, both design and engineer, and really that set us on a really good path to take what we knew of the vision and what we were trying to pull off and build it. Of course, that early on, we had to just balance this desire to be perfect and let go of some of that, right? I think on the development side, especially, you're there because you've got this great business idea or this vision that you're pushing forward, and that's what you should enable. I remember early on being we went through Techstars in 2013, and I remember having discussions with Kat and another developer that had just recently started about the things we were building and whether the architecture needed to be perfect. We obviously decided, hey, we may not survive. Let's build it, like we can here. This will be good enough. And I remember saying, well, if it becomes a problem when we scale, then it's a good problem to have, right? That means we're successful. Fast forward, actually, it's hilarious. Fast forward a few years, and last year we probably hit 3 or 4 of those where those words came back, and I remembered, because those exact problems that we had last year, as we've gotten really successful, were the problems that we talked about 5 years ago. But I still wouldn't do it any different. We focused on the business value, and we tried to find that balance between good and perfect, and it lasted us 5 years, which is pretty amazing, I think, in the startup process.
One question that came to mind while you were talking was, how did you ensure that you were shipping quickly in the early days? So you're going through the process of talking to your team, and you figure out what's important, and you figure out, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. So that helps you ship a little bit quicker because you look for the fastest way to bring value to the market. But what other processes or what other mental approaches did you take to making sure you were shipping fast?
Yeah, early on, I think it's maybe a little bit easier because you're working towards this vision, and there is just so much, right? You're sitting at the foot of the mountain, and there is a massive mountain to climb, and that you've got to break this thing down to even attempt approaching it, right? So we did just that, sitting down to that MVP, the vertical slices, and then focusing on, how do we break that down? We know the stories we want to pull off this vision of the product. How can we break those down to what is the smallest value that really makes sense to deliver? And so early on we did that, and we probably averaged weekly or biweekly releases, getting deploying and getting it out there. And really we found, obviously as we got things out there, started getting traction and feedback, then we'd iterate quickly on bugs and hot fixes if we needed to, but features as well. And so in the early days especially, I think just the massive amount of progress came from, really, we had a small team, all really pretty senior, and be able to push forward the technology and product. And I really think that helped us building quickly in the early days, and set us up to succeed as we grew.
So how has the product progressed and matured? Tell me about some of those things and how you work through them and how the product has progressed.
Yeah, there's probably two sides to this, right? I think one is product from a feature base. We started out, Degreed was directly to the learner. I mean, all the consumer users, and saying, let's let them track. We'll aggregate the world's best learning, like MOOCs and other things, right, that were exploding at the time, and let consumers get to those easily. Really, we iterated enough to find just an area ripe for disruption in the learning management system market, right? In enterprises, that was all based on training and compliance. And we came in having already built a product that was focused on the learner, with a really good user experience that was, really a joy to use and helpful and motivating. And then we saw this opportunity to take that to the enterprise, which is exactly how the next version of the product kind of matured. We added analytics, we added admin features to allow companies to manage that, and to get, really get data across the learning of their employees, but also allow those enterprises to put up their wikis and SharePoints and training stuff for cataloging, as well as the best of the world's learning. And so that's how the product has evolved. And now we even see, as we get further down the road, it's a lot of the focus on learning, and then building pathways to that learning has led us to, skills, and building real skills out of all of this learning. So it has, been a constant evolution and a constant transition, and been pretty exciting. On the technology side, I think, like I said, we tried to focus on good enough. We tried to make sure that we had life to live by making sure we didn't over-engineer, and that was really helpful. But really, aside from that, a lot of the architecture as a pattern has stood pretty well and the test of time, and it's allowed a lot of our engineers to focus on that value in the product and to the business.
How did you go about building your team? What did you look for in building your technology team? What sort of characteristics or skills or intangibles or tangibles? How did you pick the winning horses for your team?
I mean, we're a little bit of a unique story because my co-founder was in San Francisco. So we were remote from the get-go. We weren't even in the same office. We would travel quite a bit back and forth, but that remote working scenario worked for us. And as we, built from the network that I had here, it was really a pretty healthy focus on looking at the constraints and figuring out, do we really need to have an office? Do we need to bring people into the office every day? What do people value? And those early days, especially David and I, and Kat as well, a lot of discussions around our culture. I believe culture is really just the end result of the principles that you have in a company. And so you identify principles like empathy and flexibility and other things, and then make sure that everybody understands that, believes in it, and how it feeds into your vision. Then people can use that in their decisions and their communication with each other. And then pretty soon their decisions and communication with clients. And then what happens is your culture, right? That's the output. That's a long story to say culture was the biggest focus and the biggest worry. There are many, many brilliant engineers and fantastic people that really have solid skills to contribute. We were really, really careful about hiring around the principles that we had. We wanted a diverse workforce. Even from the early days, we set out to make sure our technology team was gender balanced, 50-50, which was really unheard of at the time. And fortunately, fast forward and now we're sitting around 47% balanced, which is pretty awesome. That focus, I think, in matching the culture. And I want to emphasize that's agreeing to these principles and to abide by them, right? It's not that everybody is the same. It's very much about diversity. But what we've found is that we've hired amazing engineers and testers and product designers and managers that really are learnable, right? They want to learn, they're teachable, they can teach others. So we largely, as we've grown, we hired senior early on, and that really set us up to get rid of red tape. We could scale and move fast. But it also put us in a situation where we had just a great batch of senior engineers, and all of them felt like that everybody else was smarter than them on the team. There were just no egos. So that's probably the other thing that really helped our success is I remember saying no to some brilliant engineers just because of the ego and what that would mean to our team.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. And obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors. But they take time and energy pulling you away from building and shipping. And that's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups like yours get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. How, you ask? Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. And the platform connects you with trusted VCSOs to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. Join over 8,000 companies, including many Y Combinator and Techstars startups who trust Vanta. Simplify compliance and get $1,000 off at vanta.com/codestory. That's VANTA.com/codestory. So how does the structure of your team align with your product development?
Yeah, I mentioned that obviously business value is really important, and that has always been a focus. So as we sat down to a growing team, we had to figure out how to structure it to get the work done. And at the time, the Spotify engineering approach was out there, and we saw that and said, hey, that makes a lot of sense. We thought it was a little bit too complicated with all the different terms for teams and guilds and other things. So we stepped back and said, hey, we're just going to call them all teams. We're going to have cross-functional product teams that are based around these strategic initiatives. So if that's too businessy, it's really just this business value that you're offering in your product, what's important and what's important to your, not just today, but what your vision is. And then we have that cross-functional team that includes a product manager to manage the roadmap of that area. Obviously designers, front-end, back-end, database developers, testers, all working together day by day by day. That's really where all the work was done. And then, so we ended up with, a team like that is just learner focused. That's what they did, was that learner experience. And they focused on making sure that was the best that it could be. And then we had another team that was focused on enterprise and building the admin and analytical tools analytics tools that the admins needed. Those product managers owned that roadmap. And then we built a different structure that was a people management structure as we got bigger, so that we could make sure that people were just really had this idea of their career path, this idea of learning and what skills are they picking up. Because we're a learning company, we give everybody $100 a month that we call it Flex Ed, which is like a flexible spending account for education. They can use that to learn anything. It doesn't have to be job related. And that's something that they use. And we try to plug into that with our managers to make sure people are learning and progressing, because we believe that our culture should reflect what we hope our clients' cultures look like.
Did the people management side branch across the value groups, the feature type groups?
Yes, exactly. Especially early on, where we didn't have, we always tried to stay moderately flat. As an organization, we would have a director of engineering that would be over front end, back end developers, database developers that may be spread across different initiatives, which was, it's you pick your poison early on, establishing kind of where you put those lines. And I think overall, looking back, I think it was a positive impact, but there's no question you kind of have to deal with the downside to that, and maybe not having a manager that really is in the details of the sprint to sprint work.
Did you build this to scale efficiently, or were you fighting this as you grew? Kind of walk me through that journey and how you built it initially, and then how you scaled it.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I think you have to be smart in a startup to build in a way that allows your businesses to succeed, right? Technology should really enable the business and not vice versa, right? So that really set us on a track to know that there's a give and take. There's an ebb and flow to what goes really well and is done properly, and what may not be or may struggle a little bit. So really is scaling efficiently, I think, in that frame of mind is really about iteration, and there's a big spectrum there of creating something that is really terrible and is not going to last a week, and creating something that isn't as good as you want but lasts a few years, right? And I think that's really where we landed. I will say, fortunately, we hired fairly senior early on. That allowed us not only to avoid the red tape, but it also put enough experience, just brought it to bear on building this product. So we had all been through different terrible experiences with bad quality or architecture and scale, and so we were able to bring that kind of into that first version, and as we built it. That being said, I think if you end up designing it perfectly and allowing it to scale perfectly, I would argue with almost every startup, if you're doing that, there's a chance that it may never see the light of day, right? And that's the most important thing to remember, is that's the balance, and that's what you're choosing. So, I mean, we took that effect, and I think if you dug into the details, right, I think the scale problems that we ran into were not even just database or performance. It was also product scale. All of a sudden, we were dealing with where we had designed and planned around teams of 20 employees. We get to big businesses and they have massive 60 to 80,000 employees, right? So all of a sudden the product obviously doesn't work well. Those are the things that we ran into, that we had to step back and say, okay, how are we going to resolve this in an iterative way? We stayed away from rewrites. We said we knew most of the bones were good, and we could complement that with refactoring and iterating over time to get where we wanted it to be.
This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. So tell me this, what are you most proud of with Degreed?
One of the biggest things, and I mentioned this, is culture. I'm extremely proud of how we built the team fully remote and kept this amazing culture. And and kept this real human element in the process to where we really do have just great team members that are helping each other but know each other well, and I think it helps that we set out to say we're going to get together every quarter. The product technology teams, we're going to get together and make sure we have face-to-face and kind of the informal discussions and just getting to know each other and having fun. That has made a big difference. But as we've grown, I mean, from 2 employees to now over 330 employees, right? I think that's been, I think, the thing I'm most proud of is that we've stayed true to our vision and brought this culture along. Obviously, I think there's a lot that I'm proud of beyond that. I think just building from scratch and having it be this amazing product that gives value to so many people is just something I am proud of.
Tell me about a mistake that you and your team made, and how did you respond to it?
Success as a startup, part of it is understanding and putting in perspective failure and mistakes, right? I think you're setting out with something that is risky. It's silly to think about jumping into that and expecting everything to go perfectly. So we've had a lot of different things, whether it was an infrastructure issue causing the product not to be available for a while, right? And then that kicks in other teams working with clients and keeping them informed and making sure that we were transparent about that, which I was surprised, especially the first time, to have the clients come back around to just appreciate how well we dealt with it versus trying to stick our head in the sand and ignore them when it's down. Another is we had to grow up fairly quickly. We went from our second or third enterprise customer was a massive financial institution with almost 300,000 employees, right? We went from a really small client sizes to massive, and that just meant a whole different way to manage the roadmap and to manage change management at the client, and legal and risk and compliance and all these things that you never want to think about. So in that process, there were a couple times where in the planning, the requirements of the feature and what we were doing, they never got around to the client to have them really understand it, which meant that when we deployed it, they freaked out a bit. They were like, wait a second, this isn't what we expected. This is not at all. We've got to undo this quickly. And we've always tried to take that, we put ourselves in their shoes and what they're doing and trying to do at a big company. It's important for us to help them because they're our stakeholders. And we really tried to again, be transparent and help them, understand we're working on it, and we just tried to turn it around really quickly. Again, I think every client that we've gone through that with has really appreciated the responsiveness, and really you win a lot of reputation points there, right? As you go, that allow you to do bigger things that maybe propel your vision forward, and the clients support that.
What's the future look like for Degreed and for your team?
Well, it's the team has grown so much now. It's probably product technology. It's probably about 100 or close to that. We have, as we've grown that team structure, we've expanded and we create more teams. Obviously, a lot of teams that have a narrower focus, which has really helped us pull off a lot of things and a lot of progress all at the same time. I think in the coming months and years, there's definitely going to be a larger focus on the skills part of the business and making sure that there's a really clear connection between the learning that people are doing, their skills that they have, the maybe reviews that their managers and others are leaving for them, as well as more solid assessments around that to then allow these clients to plug into the career path and really cover their skill gaps, which is pretty exciting, but it will require more growth, potential acquisitions and other things that will get us there. I definitely think there's going to be a big focus as we continue to grow fast on the culture and making sure that we keep that intact, but setting it up to scale well. Every time we hire an engineer, we make sure that they have a mentor, and they have a mentor that's been at Degreed and understands the culture and understands where do I go to communicate this or ask this question. And that has been huge, I think, in maintaining that culture. And we continue to do that as we hire. Even as fast as we hire, we make sure that people have somebody to talk to about not just the code or the architecture, but also their job and their family. And that has helped kind of weld this together. So I anticipate, obviously, as the faster you grow, the harder it is to make sure you keep the wheels on the bus like that. And that's where our focus will be.
So name an architect, a CTO, tech person, entrepreneur, any person that you look up to, and why.
The people I admire are kind of in two camps. I think one is those who've been really successful, but with the success have brought change and impact in the world, right? I think Bill Gates is one I pull out and say, you know what, there's a lot of directions he could have gone with being so successful, and the way he's gone with improving the world is amazing. At the end of the day, you know, I hope that that's what I can do, is do good in the world. And so I really look up to that. You know, being in and talking to a lot of different startups, I enjoy seeing their perspectives and what they're doing and how they're going through this struggle. I think once you go through a startup, then there are certain things when you talk to another founder that are implied around battle scars and terrifying fundraising and fundraising that maybe didn't happen when it should have, right? Those are things that I look at.
If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently or consider taking another approach on?
Yeah, I think like mistakes, this list is pretty long, right? Or can be long. I think there's always a give and take with all the decisions we've made along the way. So there's always whenever that question's asked, then I quickly go to a couple of things, and then I think, well, would I really want that to change because it meant, you know, I'd probably take a different problem instead of the one we got and were able to solve. But I think early on, our flat structure was really helpful and critical, I think, for autonomy and pushing forward the business. I think where, you know, as we grew, I think really just the last year or two, as we've hired so much, it becomes a little more tricky to ensure standards and just making sure that people are doing things in the same way or a similar way, right? Leveraging the same frameworks and looking at it the same way, so that you don't create more problems with people trying to reinvent the wheel, right? And that's probably the biggest thing. I think we probably should have, a year or two earlier, set up a really strong structure around, tech leads and architecture. We were fortunate, like I said, we hired senior, and we had probably 12 to 15 that have been kind of head architects or lead architects at companies before. So that's really amazing. But you still have the decisions that have to be made, right? At some point, there's somebody that's got to understand the problem, be able to say, this is the way we need to go. And we have so many great people that there was the worry that somebody wouldn't just say, let's do this then. Right. So I think that's probably one thing I'd go back to and say, I wish I probably would have done that differently, just to allow us to scale a little bit better as we've gone on.
So you meet someone on a plane and they tell you they are a startup CTO building their dream. What advice would you give them just getting started?
Founders, when they talk to each other, know about battle scars. When you talk to somebody that hasn't been there, then it's tricky to help them understand what that is. And to be honest, if I were to ask somebody before I started to read that question, I'm glad nobody told me exactly how hard it might be. There's a chance I wouldn't have done it. But I will say, I think building a startup is one of the most amazing things you'll do. At the end of the day, it has been in my life one of the best experiences, aside from my family, that I've had. Both exciting and terrifying and proud and successful, but regret some things. Like it really just is a big mix. And so I would say, it's a lot of work, but work hard, focus on the right things. And for a tech leader especially, I think the big thing is focus on technology enabling the business. Don't get in the classic kind of engineering hole of saying what matters is the technology, and so I love this stack and I'm going to nurture this stack, and this is the new thing that came out, so I'm going to use that. And if you don't have any business value justification for it, maybe you should shelve it until a little later in the process, right? And then second, I think I mentioned this as well, just focus on culture early. Identify those principles, make sure they're part of your interview process, your one-on-one process. It's conversations in your team meetings that you use those as you make decisions to both support your decision, but help other people understand how they can make their decisions. Those are two things I'd say, critical in a startup tech co-founder jumping into that journey.
Well, Eric, thank you for your time and for being on the Code Story podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
You bet.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Laupart, co-produced and edited by George Macharko. Special thanks to Deanna Chapman and Stephanie Campisi for their promotional support. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Breaker, or the podcasting app of your choice. Make sure to check us out at codestory.co or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn.
Taxes was waiting around for your taxes to be done, which led to worrying about not getting any money back. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes in a day to get you up to $4,000 fast with a refund advance loan. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Expert filing only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Refund advance has $0 loan fees and 0% APR. Refund advance loans may be issued by First Century Bank, N.A. or WebBank. Terms apply, subject to approval.